Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees Snow White. That's right, the 2025 live-action remake of the original classic film, the first ever fully featured animated feature from Disney Animation. I know that was a lot of redundancies in there, but hey, it is early in the morning here. And so Snow White is indeed opening and is going to dominate the box office, at least when it comes to the domestic totals. But overall, it's not going to be a very strong opening for this movie. Right now, Box Office Theory, as you can see, is reporting $42 million opening weekend. If you remember back, this has been, this site, specifically Box Office Theory, has been tracking the overall estimates for this movie, and at one point, it was upwards of $70-ish million being expected to be made by this movie, and that was already, in and of itself, not a very good starting point. So the fact that initially this was going to be going in that direction, probably because of last year's success of films like Inside Out 2 and Moana 2, people thought, hey, maybe this film will be able to kind of continue on that Disney magic. Clearly, that is not happening here, though, because as it started off in that $70-ish million domestic opening, it has plummeted all the way down to $40 million. And what's more interesting is when you go into the actual estimates from Sean Robbins over on Box Office Theory, as he says here, right now the traditional tracking is putting this film at a $45 to $50 million opening, but according to his metrics, he is now seeing a low case scenario, a worst case scenario of the domestic being $37.5 million, and a best case scenario of $47. So obviously, these are really bad numbers for this movie. Remember, this movie cost at least $270 million to make. Even Tony over at Deadline, good old Tony, and Nance over at Deadline have to admit this fact, right? This is the article that they write together where they talk about the global totals. And by the way, I do find it quite entertaining that they're continuing to shill for Disney by saying here it hopes to avoid a poison apple because of a $100+ million opening weekend in the global marketplace. That seems to insinuate that $100+ million would be a huge win for them, that would be able to avoid the poison apples. The problem is that a $100 million global opening is abysmal. When you remember, this film cost $270 million, and as I mentioned, even Tony has to admit, yeah, guess what? The reported budget is $270 million. This was all, of course, because of the revelations given by Caroline Reed over on Forbes. She's done a lot of really good research on this. She did mention, though, in that article, and this is something that does need to be reminded, right, that there was a tax break, there was a tax incentive for Disney. Around $55.5 million was the value of it at that time. This was back in 2023, which meant the budget was only about $215-ish million. The problem, though, is that was back in 2023, when this film got delayed, when we know that there were extensive reshoots, and if you've seen the movie, you know exactly where these reshoots come in, because the film is just a hodgepodge of random ideas that really just do not work in any way. And so when you take all of these things into account, this film likely cost a net total of $250 to $300 million by the end of its run. Because of that, that means the break even for this movie is going to be north of $600+ million. We're looking at $600 to $800 million that this film will need to make to break even. That's just based off of probably a more conservative estimate of what the budget of this movie actually ended up costing. This is honestly one of the worst case scenarios that Disney can have for an opening weekend. So I do find it, again, very entertaining and funny that they're trying to spend $100 million globally. Again, that's only, according to their metrics, $45 to $50 million domestic, and then only $55 million from the international markets. So they, of course, also go into some of the controversy surrounding, Rachel Zegler and all of those things. It's also clearly something that was rushed, even though it has two people in the byline of this article. They still had a misspell. I always find it entertaining when professional writers do that. As someone who is not a professional writer themselves, it's just always interesting to see how these things get passed, right, at the professional level in this way. But yeah, $100 million, that's not a good thing, right? And as you can see, the breaking news is that Snow White has made $3.5 million in its previews, which is higher than Dumbo. And if you remember, Dumbo was a massive and catastrophic flop for Disney. It was actually one of the worst performing Disney live action films that they ever had. It goes on here to mention that $3.5 million, according to their sources, is the number at the level Mark Webb directed musical is above the $2.3 million of Maleficent, 18% of its Friday total, and then also above Dumbo's 2.6. Now, keep in mind, that's not all that much better than that. It's not that much higher than that. It goes on, it's also not that far from DreamWorks Animation's Kung Fu Panda 4 last year, which did $3.8 million. The issue is that this film, again, the total domestic that it's looking at right now is not looking to be all that good. He also mentioned saying the $270 million production budget there He also goes into saying here that right now he's wondering if it might actually be over $50 million opening weekend. Now, here's the thing, okay? Even though right now Box Office Theory does have this right now at $37.5 to $47 million, Box Office Pro is right now having it between 45 and 55, and even Box Office Report has it around $43.5 million. The fact is that there is a possibility for this film to do roughly $40 to $50 million. There is absolutely that possibility on the table, and the big reason for that is because of walk-up traffic. Those are things you really cannot predict. You cannot predict how many people are going to show up on the day not having pre-bought their tickets. This film might actually be able to appeal to the Hispanic demographic, and if they're able to do that, right, that demographic tends to pay more in cash than with credit cards. And so, with that being the case, if it is able to appeal to that demographic, again, jury is still out very much on that possibility, you could end up seeing a higher number by the end of the weekend. Now, again, these right now are not looking all that great. I tend to go and trust Box Office Theory's reporting and what he's thinking things are going to be, but even he has 47 million being at that higher end of where this film likely will end up. And again, for me, I would say I could see this film doing closer to $40 million, maybe 40 to 50 million. Again, I think that is a actual very good range of what we're likely going to see for this movie. Even if it does get to those points, though, even if it does get to 40 to 50, even if it does open to $100 million globally, even if it opens to $125 million globally, because that's probably the range that we're seeing there, it's not going to be able to change the fact that this film cost way too much money. Again, $270 million is the reported budget. We see this, of course, reported by Caroline Reed, but the fact that even Tony at Deadline is saying 270 is the reported budget, not 215, so not including that tax incentive there, it indicates then that Disney must be pretty comfortable with the trades, because we all know these trades are oftentimes shills for Disney, and not Caroline Reed, because she's obviously there to expose them in many ways, but the people over at Deadline, for sure, if even they have to admit this film likely cost $270 million to make, right? That tells you, okay, that number is probably in the ballpark of likely where the final cost of this film's production budget alone likely ended up costing. So at a $270 million production budget, that means that the total cost with typical marketing for a film of that size would bring the total cost around $405 million. Again, there's a range there, of course. It could be anywhere from $350 to $450 million in total cost, which means that a break-even point is looking at basically between a $675 million global number and an $810 million global number that it would need to actually break even. At $3.5 million in your domestic opening on your Thursday opening, meaning you're tracking towards about $100 million for your global opening, that is not good, right? $100 million, that's about an eighth, right, of the entirety, sorry, actually a little bit more than that, but it's talking about in this capacity, right, a very specific, small portion of that $810 million likely break-even point. And again, the reason why the break-even is likely higher, that 3 times number, is because of the fact that, one, ticket prices have obviously changed quite a bit, and so we know that the metrics there of as far as how much total money you make is really meaningless in many regards. But even more importantly, it's because of how little they get return on investment from those international markets. It's making more overall in those international markets, and because it's making more in those international markets, it means that it's going to get less on those numbers, right? 40% from those international markets in general, right, on average, without China. China alone, 25% is what they get from that country, and then only a 55% cut, roughly, from the domestic portion. And so, obviously, we know Disney is one to put this film in so many different theaters, right? We've seen them do this before, right? We saw them do this with Mufasa. Mufasa had an abysmal opening, but then was able to leg out. I think the big difference is that even with Mufasa, even though the film was not very good, it was still able to appeal to the kids. The question really is going to be, is this going to appeal to the kids? Is this going to appeal, probably more so in this case, to the female demographic, to moms and wanting, those moms wanting to bring their kids, especially their daughters, to go see in the movie? I think personally, because they did so many changes to the story, it really isn't a live action remake. It really is a modern day retelling, trying to hit on certain themes and hit on certain songs and certain notes from the original, of course. But there are so many changes made to the narrative. I think it's going to be so different. It's not going to have that same type of capabilities, of capacities. I could totally see this doing more similar to what we saw with a film like Dumbo than we would see with a film like Mufasa. I think that if we're going to end up seeing the final numbers there, that's probably where it's going to end up. Now, let's just go ahead and go over to thenumbers.com, because obviously I think that this is going to be where kind of like the general hub is going to be 4,200 screens. So again, they are pushing this thing out there. As I always say, Disney loves to push this thing out. And that also means that they are pushing this thing in IMAX. They're pushing this thing in all the premium format screens. They are forcing theaters to have a certain number number of 3D showings, a certain number of other premium format screens. That's just what they do, right? They like to tie the hands of the theaters to say, oh, you want our movie? You want to actually make some money this weekend? Okay, here's what you got to do to get the actual contract, to get the actual permission to show our movie. And it ultimately means that they're going to have a lot of theaters that are probably not going to be all that full. And so though overall total money is going to be higher for them, that also means that they're showing a lot of movies to very little people. And so those costs, do they really make up for the amount of money that they're getting in? It does, I think, bring up a very good question. Now, let's just bring up, since I did mention the live-action Dumbo, to see kind of, again, a general idea of what we can expect this movie to likely be. As you can see here, right now, they are projecting, Dumbo was brought up, right? 2019's Dumbo. This was like the last strong year of movies. Even that film, though, only made $353 million. Now, Dumbo is also a beloved classic from back in the day. It's clearly something, with a flying elephant, you would think, oh, that's going to appeal a lot to the kids. But because the film was dark, because the film was especially portrayed much more darkly than what the original source material was, it drove a lot of families away. It made a lot of parents uncomfortable to bring their kids to these movies. Will Snow White's portrayal, will Snow White's changes, will the controversy surrounding Snow White be enough to do something similar where it drives those families away? I think it's going to drive some families away. Whether it's going to drive as many away, I don't know. Again, because specifically Snow White is much more of a female young girl demographic. And so again, I think those moms and their daughters is going to be a huge factor here that could actually break towards and benefit Disney's Snow White and actually benefit and go towards their favor. But it's going to be very interesting to see exactly where this ultimately falls in and falls down the line. Also, that film only cost $170 million, but it only made 2.1 times its budget. So again, I would expect probably similar numbers here. And of course, these are unadjusted for inflation. So we're probably looking closer to $400 million or so. I could see Snow White doing about that much. But even if the film does better, or even if the film gets to $600 million, even if the film does as great as Mufasa, which down the line made $700 million, which is still a far cry from the well over $1 billion that the quote unquote live action remake of 2019's The Lion King was able to get to well over $1 billion. That's still a far cry from that. And so even though if it does get to Mufasa, because again, that had a very weak opening weekend and was still able to leg out, was still able to do well down the line, if it still gets that number globally, we're talking in this instance about a film that is not going to be able to make its money back. Again, it has to make at least roughly around $800 million to actually break even. And so I think that is the reason why these numbers here are not looking all that great. Now, again, we like to do things in real time here to keep me honest. So let's just go ahead and try to find this live action remake of Disney's Snow White, because the last thing I want to talk about here is what we can expect down the line, right down the stretch, because we have seen some of their films like Mufasa be able to leg out and do better down the road. That's also because I believe with Mufasa there was a delayed release in international markets, and so that obviously kind of increases the release over time. But as of right now, and again, this is probably what I expected, there are no countries listed as having a later release date. So this is getting released in China. So China's numbers will be baked into this international. So that's talking about a $55-ish million international total gross for the weekend, for the opening weekend, is what Tony and them at Deadline were trying to point out there. So that includes from China. That includes from other massive European markets like France and Germany, Italy, Japan, Mexico also sometimes is a major player. United Kingdom is a major player. So we're seeing all of the major players come out. So there's not going to be any international market that has not been accounted for. Now, of course, there will be other countries that get added to this chart likely as time goes on. But the fact that the movie right now is expected to do only $100 million and it's opening globally all in the same day, and that's what it's looking to, that is going to be a big problem for the film going forward. Now, just to, again, keep me honest, let's go ahead and look back to Mufasa to see how its release schedule worked, because this obviously came out at different time of year, and sometimes at different times of the years there are certain events going on in different countries that make them delay it in different ways. But again, this film still made about $463 million internationally. But let's go ahead and pull this up. So a lot of it coming from France, United Kingdom, Germany. And so as you can see here, some of the films released in 12/19, 12/20. So pretty much around the same time. Okay, I stand corrected. Again, that's why I like to do this, because I do like to be honest here. So this film did have a global opening all on the same day. It was still able to leg out over time, especially domestically. And I do think that that is something that could potentially happen for Disney's Snow White. The question is going to be, is it going to be able to do so? Is it going to be able to make up for that $270 million production budget, which again, even Tony at Deadline has to admit is the case? And hey, what are y'all's thoughts? Do you think the film is going to be able to make 45 to $50 million in its domestic opening? Do you think it's going to be under 40? I think some people are going to have kind of this hatred for the film, and they're going to want the film to fail. And I totally understand that as that sentiment, but we have to keep in mind reality too, right? Most people aren't aware of the controversy of Rachel Zegler. Most people don't live in this online space that we do. And so most people are not going to be impacted by that. Instead, they're going to be impacted by marketing. They're going to be impacted by the general look and feel. I don't think it's going to be enough. I don't think the trailers did enough to convince people, especially when they showed those really creepy looking dwarves. And the way I described it on X, on Twitter, was basically it looked like MODOK from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That is the kind of face they put on every single one of the 7 dwarves for the movie. And I don't think that's going to be enough to sell it. I don't think it's going to be enough to push people out there. Maybe the cute animals will be, but it's not looking all that good. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll mention quickly here, Mickey 17 expected to drop 33%. So this film continuing to be a flop. Black Bag dropping 45%. Novocaine, which is actually not a bad movie. Not great. 6 out of 10, right? 60% rad score over on Critic List for me. 53% drop in its second weekend. So again, a movie that it's question mark as far as whether it'll be able to make its money back or not. It didn't cost very much, and so we could likely see this number, get cut quite a bit. So maybe it'll be able to track. We'll make some official projections on that this weekend. Black Bag cost too much, $60 million or so to make the film. Too many actors, too many big name actors, probably asking for bigger paychecks. So this film likely will end up being a flop. Mickey 17 continues to be a flop, of course, and this film, again, will have done probably a little bit better down the line based off of the drops that we're seeing for the film, but not all that great either. Last Breath cost a bit too much. Monkey continuing to add to its profits, and of course, Captain America: Brave New World probably getting close to $400 million by the end of this weekend. And as I mentioned last weekend, this was likely now going to be the case. As we all know, this film, when it first came out, we thought, hey, this film may not even get to be able to crack $400 million worldwide. Now, because of its massive $300 million budget, probably minimum $300 million budget, we know that this film is still a massive flop because you don't get 100% of those box office receipts. But as of right now, the last update is $390 million being reported by thenumbers.com. And we could expect a few $1 million being, brought to this movie domestically, a few $1 million internationally too. So don't be surprised to see this film get between up to $395 to $398 million by the end of this weekend. And this film will be able to crack $400 million after that. It's not going to get much more than that, though. And so this film will still absolutely be and end as a massive and catastrophic failure. But what are y'all's thoughts on these numbers? Let me know your thoughts on the comment section below. Also, have you seen Snow White? What are your thoughts on it? I thought it was a heinous film. I gave it a 19%. 1.9 out of 10 heinous score over on Critic List because, yes, Rachel Zegler can sing. That is a fact. I don't know why people still push back on that, right? She absolutely can sing. Just because Disney made the choice to auto-tune every single person in the movie does not mean that she needed it and does not mean that that is what her voice actually sounds like. Having seen her sing, live and sing online, several times, because she was online presence beforehand and she has a lot of singing videos that are out there, you can clearly see that she has the talent for it. And even though they also brought in great songwriters like Pasek and Paul, who have done Broadway shows like Dear Evan Hansen, which has a very good score. Also, they did a score for The Greatest Showman. They have the capacities, and a lot of the songs and a lot of the things that they wrote, they sound epic. They sound really cool. The problem is they don't fit in Snow White. They wrote new music for Snow White, and then they tried to adapt the older songs to fit this newer tone and style, and it just really does not work. So again, your thoughts on those things as well, let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, line up that fire button. Actually don't, because I'm not over on Aussie anymore because they don't back up these videos anymore. So smash the rumble button instead. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Friday. No meat today. Don't forget. And as always, God bless. Now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started, and also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.